I am the Marketing and Communications Manager for Weave. I've been here about 4 years and excited to see everyone. Thank you for joining us for this 1 hour of great conversation, hopefully good beverage and good connections. We'll be chatting with Marina Crouse, our special guest today. And then we'll also do a breakout session. If you've done these Strong Women, Strong Coffees with us before, we do a breakout session. So everyone has the opportunity to connect with each other and to chat, and we'll pose a breakout question to give you some sort of framework to chat about on theme with our special guests. So without further ado, I'm going to go through our slides and get to the introductions, and then also make sure everybody is feeling where they want to be, has any questions, pop those into the chat. If you have any questions, please put any questions, comments in the chat. So thank you for and all of you who are able to turn your video on and let us see your smiling faces. If you can't do that, totally okay. We understand. That works well. And as you saw, we will be recording today's session, not the breakouts, but just the session part of it. And as I mentioned, if there's anything you'd like to ask or share, go ahead and put those on the chat. And my wonderful colleague, Allie, will be helping me monitor the chat in case I forget to look over there in the little chat box. So first, we'd like to thank our sponsors, because even though it's sort of early in the year for Weave sponsorships, we have some wonderful sponsors who already joined on board with Weave to support the programming that we do. And so special thank you to the Ventura County Credit Union, Nicholson and Schwartz CPAs, Cox Communication, the Acorn Project, and media sponsor TV Santa Barbara. So thank you to our sponsors. And here's Marina. Is it weird to see your face up there?
A little bit.
Crouse. Marina is our special guest today, and very excited to have Marina here. I had the great opportunity to chat with her a few times, and we've decided we already feel like long lost friends, that we've known each other for a long time, even though we've only just met this month. She's wonderful, and I'm excited to introduce her to all of you and for you to meet Marina. So a little bit about Marina. I'm going to share some of your background and some of my perspective so people can get to know you. If you've seen on our socials that Marina is a writer and editor with 10 years of experience in a variety of roles, including production, editing, and publishing. And she's worked at some small indie presses and some huge publishing corporations, and has a Master of Fine Arts degree in creative writing. Now, what Marina is doing is following her dreams of writing novels and helping others write. She's very passionate about helping others write. After finishing the first draft of her novel, she realized how isolating the writing process can be. So she launched her business as a writing coach, offering both one-on-one coaching as well as group sessions. And I know she'll tell us more about that. And, for anyone who struggles with writer's block, having a writing coach is a really great way to build your skills with an experienced perspective from someone who can guide and encourage you through the process. Marina is also a Weave client. She participated in our Live Plan business course, and she's currently in our Thrive Business Consulting program. She's, like I said, she's super passionate about helping others write and about writing herself. And during our conversations, she had this great quote that I wrote down. I hope it's okay that I share this, Marina. But when we were talking about coming to things like this, or taking courses or programs, or doing things that are for yourself, for your business, Marina said that investing in myself is scary. It's rewarding, and it's powerful. And I thought those were 3 great words to describe, the scary, rewarding, and powerful seemed like a really good description of what it would feel like as a business owner, and maybe even not as a business owner, as anyone investing in yourself. Scary, rewarding, and powerful. So to all of you who are here, you can maybe relate to things being scary, things being rewarding, and things being powerful. So great introduction to Marina. So welcome, Marina. How are you this morning?
Thank you so much. It's always kind of funny to have someone talk about your history, and I appreciate that warm introduction. I'm excited to be here today, and I'm really looking forward to sharing some ideas and knowledge about writing and writing for business, because I know how hard it is.
Great. Good. So we'll start out. I have a couple of questions for Marina, and feel free, like I said, if you have something else that comes up, to put it in the chat and we'll add to the conversation. But first question, wanted to start with you, Marina, is you launched your business in 2020, and we all know what was happening in 2020. What have you achieved as an entrepreneur since then that you're particularly proud of?
Ooh, that's a big question. So I've been in business for 3 years now, and what I'm probably most proud of is learning to measure success that in a way that's not financial, because I think it's so easy to say, well, if I'm earning this much, I'm bringing this much revenue in, that's when I'll know I'm successful. But starting a business is hard, and we all know that you don't have that like immediate upward trajectory. So learning to measure my progress and success in more quantifiable, tangible ways and through building blocks has been really powerful to remind myself, like, yeah, this is what I'm doing, and I believe in the process. So
Yeah,
I
I know
think
you mentioned too that, how testimonials are a great part of that measurement process.
exactly, learning to ask for testimonials can be challenging because you don't want anyone to say anything bad. But I found that if you build it into part of your offboarding process and just ask for feedback, for better or for worse, most of the time it's for better, and it's very validating to realize, oh, I helped that person. This is the progress they feel. And then you can always return, if you have it on your website or even if you have it on a Google Doc, you can always kind of return and review it, and kind of, it helps you keep faith in yourself and be your own cheerleader, which is so important when you're running your own business. You have to believe in yourself the most.
Good. That's true. And I know we have several business owners, entrepreneurs on this call, so I'm guessing they might be able to relate to that feeling as well. Another question for you: what are some of the challenges that you've experienced as a business owner, and how have you overcome those? And what advice would you give to other new entrepreneurs?
So the biggest challenge I've overcome is setting boundaries, which I think we can all relate to. It's pretty common, especially when we experienced the last 3 years and our lives got turned upside down. But learning to set boundaries for myself with my email, my time, what I was willing to do project-wise was huge. When I first started, I didn't have a clear idea of my business. I just knew I wanted to help and what I could do. So I was taking on any project that anyone pitched to me, and then quickly burnt out from that. And so learning to set hours for myself. I work 9 to 5:30, even though I'm my boss. And I try my hardest not to check my email after 7 p.m. I don't always succeed, but little things like that where you can put those, I don't want to keep saying the word boundaries, but put those qualifiers on your time where you're not constantly thinking about work, working for other people, and like letting yourself breathe and reset is huge, especially if you're trying to do anything creative. You have to like disengage your brain. So setting boundaries like that, I had to learn how to say no to clients whose project goals weren't in line with my expertise. And like pivoting was a huge one for me. I started my business in 2020 when people were still working from home. A lot of people had more free time. And then now, 3 years later, the world has opened back up. People are back in the offices. People are socializing again. The needs changed, and I could have just kept hammering what I was doing, but instead I pivoted and figured out, okay, how do I want to help, and what do those people need? What does the help look like for them? It's not about me, it's about what their needs are. So how can I meet them where they are?
And so that's good. And so can you give us an example of something that pivoted, from when you started and were doing writing coaching at the beginning, and then how the pandemic changed what people's needs are for writing coaching and the way they were receiving writing coaching support?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I started, I would work one-on-one with people for about 6 months. And it was wonderful. People had that time to spare, but now they want quicker results and shorter time frames. So I've actually started building out a group program for people that's 6 weeks long versus 6 months, so that people can work it around their work schedules, work it around their families, work it around being from home. And that was a huge pivot for me because I love working one-on-one with people. Connection is really important to me. And so figuring out, I can still help people in ways that better suits them and connect, but in a more affordable, approachable, sustainable way. That was a huge pivot for me.
That's good. So pivoting is always part of business, what I'm learning with our many entrepreneurs, and not only part of business, but just part of life. Being able to be flexible and pivot at all times as needed. That happens naturally, or the need for it happens often. So lots of flexibility. That's good. I'm interested. So let's get to the conversation about writing. And, obviously there's lots of different kinds of writing. For business writing, we know there are, things like e-blasts, newsletters, social media, writing ads, writing copy for radio. I do that. I write the Weave ads in both English and Spanish. So there's writing specialties for writing radio spots, all different kinds of business writing. And for many of us, just getting started with writing can be a stumbling block. I feel like writing can be something like public speaking. Not everyone loves to do it, but we all need to do it. And there are ways to overcome it, overcome those stumbling blocks. So whether someone is a business owner developing marketing content, or if they're a creative writer working on a novel or a project, what tips do you have specifically for getting started with a writing project?
So I have been writing for longer than I can remember, but at least a solid 10 years. And getting started is always the hardest part, whether you have a background and a degree in writing like I do, or if you are just so knowledgeable about your business and need to communicate it, it will always be a challenge to sit down and get started. The number one thing I tell my clients is to take the pressure off. I tell it myself too. When you're sitting down to write an email blast, you might be thinking, okay, I have to communicate my sale that's going to happen in July, and I have to really drum up engagement. But you can't think, oh, well, this is the email that will make or break my business. It puts too much pressure on it and you'll never type out those words. So figuring out how to take off the expectation to just sit down and say, okay, what am I trying to say here? What do I need to communicate? And see what you can come up with really helps. One of the ways I do that, especially if I'm feeling like there's no one home, is to use a writing prompt. So creatively, you can Google creative prompts. You can Google is your best friend. You can look for any type of creative writing prompt or fiction prompt or nonfiction prompt or for business. But typically I will look at my surroundings and say, okay, here is my favorite pen. What could I write about it for 5 minutes? I can talk about the color. I can talk about the way it feels on paper. I can talk about why it's helpful in my editing revisions on paper. So using little small moments to get yourself started that have it's a pen, it doesn't matter. So you can start talking about it. There's no pressure because it's just a pen. And then you think, oh, well, I've already been writing for 5 minutes and I know how to talk about this. So let me do the same thing with my business. This is what I do. This is what it looks like to work with me. This is why we should work together. So kind of sometimes you have to trick yourself into starting is the professional way to say that.
That's good. I know you also mentioned, I loved this idea that you had, Going to your favorite book. Talk about that idea that you shared with me about for getting started with writing. Grab one of your favorite books and do what with it, Marina?
Yeah, so I learned this in grad school and it's immensely helpful in any type of writing. But when you're feeling stuck or feeling like you aren't quite sure how to do what you want to do with your writing, go back and grab your favorite piece of writing, your favorite book, your favorite essay, and read it not as a reader, but as more of an analyst, and think, okay, what do I like about it? What is it? The language that is speaking to me? Is it the vocabulary? Is it the way they describe? I think when we were talking, Lisa, I used John Steinbeck as an example. He's one of my favorite writers. And the way he talks about lightning storms is so visceral and enigmatic. And you start reading it, or I start reading it, and I think, oh, I could do this. I could try. And then once you've read a piece of words that you really like, sit down and just try to rewrite that paragraph, just a paragraph, whether it's the lightning storms from John Steinbeck, or if you have someone you follow on social media and you really admire the way they talk to their audience, try to write your own version of what they do. It's hugely helpful because you don't have to post it, you don't have to share it, but then you can see, okay, this is what Amy Porterfield says, this is how I would say it. Where are they different? Where could I grow? It's a really valuable tool in just practicing. And the more you do that, the more comfortable you'll be shooting out those words.
I love that tip because it's easy to go grab your favorite book and reread a paragraph or a phrase from it and think about getting inspiration from there. Another great tip that I wrote down in our notes is you shared the ability to go out and find inspiration from other places. And also you talked about asking yourself what you want to say, what you're trying to communicate, who needs to hear it, and why they need to hear it. And I know one of the comments in the chat was you like working on recreating a website, as Stephanie shared, working on creating a website, where to start with writing for that and how to speak about your own website or your own business. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Stephanie, writing web copy for your own business is so challenging. I just redid my website. I found the same problem. I was talking with a friend of mine who her business is to copy edit for other businesses. So she excels and is an expert in writing website copy. And she said the same thing, writing about yourself, it's so much harder. So I think this comes back to maybe taking some of the expectation and pressure off of the web copy. Thanks to the internet, everything kind of is flexible. So you can put your website up and still be tweaking the language as you grow. You don't have to have it perfect immediately for launch. And ask yourself, what am I trying to say? What does it mean to work with me? What do I offer? How does it help people? What problem does it solve? Rather than how will people receive this or how will people interpret it? Just start with, what am I trying to say? And I find it helpful to write it down like on a notebook. You can just like list it out, and then rather than staring at that blank screen trying to type, you can type from your notes and then go back and review. Oh, actually, I don't know what your business is, but actually I don't offer editing services. I only offer coaching services. So let me take that away and let me share some client experiences, some of my background, things like that. It's all about the trick with writing. I've found in my own experience and in coaching is that we focus so much on that big picture, that published novel, that launched website, the email series that's scheduled. That's really overwhelming and daunting, but you have to come back and say, okay, I need to communicate what my values are as my business. So let me write down those 4 core values. I need to talk about the sale that's coming. So let me jot down the parameters of the sale and how people can access it. Things like that. You step way back, because if you are looking, I have so many books around me. If you're looking at, this is one of my favorite books. If you're looking at a published, the blurred background, forget it. if you're looking at a published novel, you are looking at probably draft 15 of a book that's been typed away at for 2+ years and has had editors, agents, people touching it. So you can't compare yourself to someone's final product, because if you're the same thing with business, if you're looking at someone's, I'm trying to think, like Amy Porterfield, I know she's very prolific. If you're looking at her website, you might think, oh, it's perfect, I could never do that. That's not true. She has a team. She's been working on it for a while. This is not the first iteration. So long story short, just let yourself break it into bite-sized chunks and know that you can always keep tweaking it. And that's okay. Your audience won't notice if they're on your website one day and see that you have said things one way, and then they come back a month later and you've like slightly changed the language. People are not that observant. They won't notice. It's like with Instagram, I often, if I'm like scheduling something with my phone, I make typos. And then I think, oh gosh, I'm a writer, I can't make typos. Writers make typos, spoiler alert. And also, if I go and edit it in the edit option, no one's going to notice. No one's going to come back and say like, oh, she fixed her spelling error. It's okay. No one's going to notice.
That feels like a nice grace to give oneself, especially hearing it coming from a writer. Feels really good. Thank you for that, Marina. So we talked about starting writing, because sometimes just initially putting the pen or the typing to paper to electronics is hard. So I like the 3 tips: taking pressure off yourself, reading your favorite book to get in some sort of a mindset, and then asking yourself what you want to say, what you need to communicate, who needs to hear it, and why it matters. Really helpful tips. So now that we've started with those great tips for starting a writing project, what are some of your suggestions, best ways, and tips to keep the momentum going and the creativity flowing once you've started? Okay, so we've started. How do we get the momentum going and the creativity flowing?
So that people ask me, oh, where do you come up with ideas? And it's such a cheesy thing to say, but I always think from everywhere. My brain's always going. It's hard to make it stop. So kind of one way I corral it is to, like I said earlier, breaking things into smaller steps. And on my best days, I have like an hour on Fridays scheduled on my calendar to sit down and jot down ideas that come up. But in reality, I'm always thinking, I don't know if it's the creative brain, the anxiety brain, who knows, but I keep a note on my phone, like the notes app that also speaks to it like translates into my laptop. So when I'm out and I'm chatting with a friend about something and a book idea comes up, I will jot it down. If I'm speaking with a coaching client and noticing, oh, they have recurring problems in communicating their core values or their mission statement, I jot that down. And then, because I do my best to schedule time to organize, I will sit down and think, okay, I need to write my newsletter. I need to schedule out social media. I need to think about updating my website copy to update my offerings. Then I don't have to sit down and stare at a blank page. I've already been doing this back end work, kind of like simmering. So I can pull up the note app and say, okay, I have 10 ideas for things to write about. So if you are selling a product and you need to be posting regularly about it, that can feel really overwhelming, because sometimes you're just like, I don't know how else to say that I offer this product. But if you're jotting down ideas as they pop up, as you're looking at someone else's ad or post and you think, I could do something like that, if you're jotting that down beforehand, it makes it a lot easier to sit down and, well, you've already started, but sit down and just crank things out. So breaking things down into steps and kind of planning ahead or planning for the future, even if you don't know what you're going to do with it, that's really, really helpful. I also like to remind people, kind of, we were talking about, no one's going to notice if you're fixing typos on your website. No one will unless people don't notice if you repurpose content. So if you're posting about, say you're a jewelry designer and you're posting about necklaces you've designed, unless you use the same photo for 10 photos in a row, no one's going to notice because you're peppering it in. The algorithm or the email blast or whatever, they're not receiving all that information at once. So they're getting it added into their life. So repurposing content is hugely helpful. You can start with your website copy. If you're writing a bio and you're explaining, this is my background experience, and this is why I'm an expert in what I do and how I help people, you already did all that work. You don't need to recreate the wheel. You can take that framework and turn it into a blog post or a podcast episode or an email blast. And you can either use a paragraph of it and expand on it. You can pull out a line and talk about, I'm trying to think. So if I took a line from my website that says, I've worked in indie presses and big publishing houses, I could make a newsletter about, these are my experiences and what I learned from working in this and this environment. So it all kind of feeds in on itself, and it's okay to repurpose content and tailor it for the platform, because with social media, you get to be a little bit more friendly, informal. You can make typos. And then if you're posting to maybe LinkedIn or sending an email to your list, you might have a slightly different approach. You can say the same thing. You can talk about the same necklace or the same offer on all the platforms, but you just tweak it to match the voice of the platform. I see.
We have a good question. I like this question, Devin. Thank you. In the chat, see if you can help us answer this, Marina, because it applies to others as well as Devin. Devin's asking, how do you manage all the papers and documents as a writer, staying creative in the creative flow, and yet still being organized while reducing clutter?
Devin, are you at my house right now? So this is a challenge. There's that, if you are a creative person, you may know that there's like that scatterbrain element to it. I do my best to keep things digital so that I can always search for things. I use Google Drive, and I have my business website, or my business email. So all of my business fodder, I type on that drive for Google. And then I have my regular email address. I try to write all my creative things on that drive, so it's separate. It doesn't always work. I think figuring out a system that works for you, whether it's a filing cabinet or a digital folder, and being consistent with it. I know that when I'm in a rush, can get lazy and think, oh, I'll organize it later. I won't. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. Take an extra second to, like, my biggest fault in organizing myself is that I will, like, if I'm starting a new essay idea, I will name the document something that makes no sense. And so when I go to look for it later, I can't find it because I'm not thinking with that creative brain. I'm thinking with like organized brain. So figuring out a system that works for you, whether it's physical or digital, and getting like a name scheme is really helpful. And you can pivot as you go. I try at least every quarter, more like every 6 months, to go back through my files and rename things that don't make sense, delete things that are repetitive or not helpful, and rehome the things that I've saved in the wrong files. I am a chronic Post-it note user. And so at the end of every week, I write down all the Post-it note thoughts on one piece of paper. And then I think, is this helpful? Am I actually going to use this? No. And then I cross it out. And if it is helpful, I have so I jot down content ideas while I'm working on my desk. And I have one digital file on Google Docs of all my content ideas. And if I think it's an actually helpful idea, I will then on Fridays, I do a lot of things on Fridays, add them to my file. So it doesn't work, like that system might not work for you, but that's okay. Figuring out what does work is key. And knowing that you can't be completely clutter-free and completely organized all the time. That's okay. On Sunday nights, I will my desk is in my room. I will take stock of my desk on Sunday nights and set it up so that when I sit down on Monday, it's clear. I tend to pile things, and that's really distracting. So I take everything off my desk, put it back in its house on Sundays. I think figuring out a reset for yourself and letting things pile up when you're busy and knowing you can reset is really helpful. I'm just referring back to this question, Devin. With regards to staying in a creative flow, you don't always stay in it. Some days you're having like creativity and your emotions and energy are really tied. So if you are chasing your kids, chasing after your pets, taking care of older parents, dealing with life, you might feel drained. And that then you like, I know for me, I can't sit down and then just crank out words, whether it's for my novel or my business. In those moments, I turn off all my screens and I read, or I light a candle and I listen to music, or I just lay flat on the floor and recharge. But you can't stay in flow all the time. Sometimes you have to feed it and restart it a little. So I hope that helps.
Yes, that was helpful. And there's also been some great suggestions in the chat too. If everybody has seen the chat, there's some really good suggestions from flash drives. Leah mentioned that, and also having some, as Claudia mentioned, having productive environment days. Some great suggestions in there too. Another tip that you shared when we were talking about this, Marina, and I want to bring it home here before we go into our breakout rooms. So you talked about breaking things into steps, having the idea, the visual, and the writing, and planning ahead. You talked about repurposing content. You talked about ideas coming from anywhere. I liked how you said letting your outer life inspire ideas. We all have outer lives that can inspire ideas for content. And then the last tip that you had shared with me, having an accountability buddy. I really liked that idea. So talk a little bit about that before we head into our breakout rooms, please. Accountability buddy.
Yeah. So having an accountability buddy, it's such like a buzzword term right now, but it's truly helpful. If you work, especially if you're like starting your business or in your business by yourself and you work from home and you're alone, there's too much. You can't, I always say you can't create in a vacuum, and you can't create in a void. So if you struggle to schedule time to make social media content or write a newsletter or work on blog copy, try finding a friend, either like someone who is also in business or just a friend who will keep on top of you and work alongside each other. So I have an accountability buddy. We chat. A lot of things happen on Fridays. Like I said, we chat every Friday about the goals we've had, our goals for the week and what we did and what we hope to do. And for example, this week I said, I'm chatting with Weave. I need to prepare for Weave. I also have a blog post I need to write and I have to schedule some emails. And so when I call her later today, I can say, I scheduled those emails. I had the Weave chat. I didn't write that blog post. And so she will keep me accountable and ask me, why didn't you write it? What came up? That can be hugely helpful. If you have some flexibility in your schedule or you make your own schedule, I often will call this friend and we will sit on Zoom for half an hour and know that each other's there and just work on our social media copy, because that's what gets me. It's like, I want to be writing a novel. I don't always want to be posting on Instagram. So, but I know it's valuable for me to showcase what I have to offer on Instagram. So having someone you like report to who knows what you're trying to do, supports you, and will kind of nudge you along is really helpful. I host weekly writing sprints for the same reason. Every Tuesday, people join me and we start with a writing prompt, kind of like the one I gave you where it was like, describe the pen. And they write for 10 minutes and then they go off and work on whatever project they want, whether it's a novel or a collection of essays or website copy. And the thing is that you have to schedule it in your time. You have to show up and you're on Zoom, whether you have your camera off or not. People are there working alongside you. There's like psychology behind it. It tricks you into realizing like, all right, this is time to focus and I have to get this done. And I can worry about laundry and picking up the kids and planning dinner and mapping out my empire later. So if you are struggling to get things done or started and maybe like struggling to motivate yourself, find a friend. One thing I do also for this is more for my creativity side, but I've realized after spending a week at my desk, it's really hard to want to work on my novel at my desk. So I started going to coffee shops on Sundays, and being around people and just hearing them chatter has been so helpful. I'm just like, okay, this is where I'm here to write. I've got conversations A and B happening that might make an interesting conflict in my book, and I'm just going to write. And it's kind of getting yourself outside of your routine can be helpful. So that's my advice.
Good, lots of good tips there, Marina. I like the crowdsourcing from a coffee shop, overhearing other conversations.